Hello my dear friends, and welcome back. I'm delighted that you're here again, and I do so hope this story brings you peace and comfort. Tonight, our story takes us on a slow, quiet trekking expedition through the hidden textures of the valley. It is a journey that reminds us how a small, unexpected detour can lead us directly to a place of pure wonder. As we follow the tiny, solitary trail into the quiet corners of the woods, I invite you to leave behind the busy paths of your day. Let your thoughts slow down to a gentle, steady walking pace, letting your mind become as still and peaceful as the evening air. Before we begin, take this quiet moment to settle yourself completely into the soothing, welcoming embrace of your bed. Pull your blankets up over your shoulders. Let your head sink heavily into the very center of your pillow, and feel the gentle rhythmic rise and fall of your chest. Let us take one deep, grounding breath together before we step out. Inhaling a slow, cool breath of crisp autumn air, holding it for a quiet, restful moment, and now releasing it completely with a long, soft sigh. Let your eyelids grow heavy as the cottage door closes behind us. Inside the sun-warmed greenhouse of Rosehip Cottage, the afternoon air was completely still, smelling of damp terracotta pots, dried lavender bundles, and the clean metallic scent of lubricating oil. A soft amber light filtered through the small glass window panes, illuminating a wooden workbench where Rosco and the bunnies were gathered in a quiet circle. At the center of the table sat one of their most treasured possessions, a miniature hand-crafted mechanical robin. It was a beautiful piece of old-world clockwork, its plump body covered in tiny, overlapping brass feathers that caught the light like polished copper. It had two bright black glass beads for eyes, a delicate wire beak, and two neatly formed brass feet. But the little robin was broken. When the heavy brass key in its side was turned, the internal gears would slip with a soft metallic click. Instead of hopping forward in a straight line, the tiny bird lurched at an angle. Its left leg barely brushed the ground, while its right brass foot pressed firmly down. If placed on a dusty surface, it would leave behind a peculiar, unmistakable trail, a single neat footprint repeating itself in a slow, hopping line. They had placed the robin on the workbench, intending to pack it into a velvet-lined box to take to Thimbley Whisker, the village clockmaker, for a proper mending. Visiting the cottage that afternoon was a young, wide-eyed field mouse named Timothy. Timothy was a tiny creature with a coat the colour of a hazelnut shell, and large, curious ears that twitched at every sound. While Rosco and the bunnies were distracted at the far end of the greenhouse, carefully selecting a piece of soft flannel to wrap the robin in, Timothy stepped up to the workbench on his tiptoes. The glittering brass key sticking out of the robin's side was simply too tempting to resist. With nimble fingers, Timothy reached out a tiny paw and gave the key a gentle turn. The internal mainspring tightened. The moment Timothy let go, the little mechanical robin whirred to life. Its tiny brass wings gave a soft metallic flap, and it began to lurch across the workbench. Before anyone could reach it, the clockwork bird hopped right off the edge of the table, landed softly on the mossy floor, and lurched straight out of the open greenhouse door, disappearing into the overgrown lanes beyond the garden wall. When Rosco and the bunnies turned around and realized the little bird had vanished, they didn't panic or rush. In the valley, every task is approached with patience and a slow, steady mind. They walked out into the crisp afternoon air, kneeling down at the edge of the greenhouse gravel to begin their tracking. "Look here," Caratina whispered, pointing her paw toward the edge of the lawn. There, pressed clearly into the damp green blades of grass, was the unmistakable trail. Because of its broken gear, the robin had left a perfectly straight, lurching line made of just one footprint. The impression of its right brass foot was small and neat, pressed down just enough to bend the grass blades, while the left side showed nothing but untouched dew. They followed the single trail as it wended its way out of the garden. The lane was completely quiet, held fast in the golden chill of late autumn. They followed the footprints off the grass and into the kitchen garden, where the trail moved across the dark, crumbling loam of the empty vegetable patches. Here, the single foot had pressed deeper into the rich black soil, leaving a crisp, clear imprint of 3 tiny toes and a small heel, repeating itself every few inches in a meandering roundabout way. The bunnies walked in single file, their eyes fixed on the earth, the rhythmic crunch of their boots matching the steady pacing of the robin's path. The trail led them down the sloping bank toward the river, where the texture of the ground changed entirely. The dry loam gave way to thick, grey clay and wet river silt that glistened under the low afternoon sun. In the soft, wet earth of the riverbank, the single footprints became deep, tiny craters. Each little indentation had already begun to fill with a microscopic pool of clear river water, reflecting the pale blue sky above like a string of glass beads winding along the water's edge. They traced the lurching trail under the sweeping bare branches of old willow trees and past clusters of dried, whistling reeds, moving further and further away from the familiar paths of the valley. The single water-filled trail continued along the winding riverbank, leading Rosco and the bunnies far beyond the familiar boundaries of their afternoon walks. The further they went, the quieter the valley became. The distant, comforting sounds of the village, the faint clink of the blacksmith's hammer, and the low rumble of the mill water wheel faded away entirely, replaced by the deep, rhythmic hush of ancient wilderness. The wet river silt eventually gave way to a dense carpet of old woodland moss, so thick and springy that it felt like walking upon plush wool mattress. Even on this soft surface, the little clockwork robin's broken gait remained unmistakable. The right brass foot had pressed firmly enough to leave a small cup-like dimple in the green velvet moss, while the left side remained completely smooth and undisturbed. They followed this lonely lurching line of prints beneath the low, sweeping canopy of ancient hornbeam trees, their boots making absolutely no sound against the deep forest floor. Suddenly, the open woodland came to an abrupt halt, blocked by a massive towering wall of wild vegetation. It was an ancient thicket of blackthorn, wild briar, and tangled hawthorn bushes, woven together so tightly over the centuries that it looked like a solid, impenetrable fortress of grey wood and sharp brambles. The outer branches were heavy with the frost-dusted remains of autumn sloes, and a thick curtain of old, dark-veined ivy draped over the entire structure like a heavy velvet blanket. Millie Moonbeam stopped, lifting her long ears to listen. The woods around them were perfectly still, yet from somewhere deep within the centre of the dense thicket, a faint rhythmic sound could be heard, a slow metallic whir and click that hummed softly through the cool air. Caratina knelt down at the very base of the bramble wall, carefully parting a cluster of dry, copper-coloured bracken ferns. "Look," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "The trail goes right inside." There, tucked between two gnarled, mossy roots of an old blackthorn bush, was a tiny, arched opening in the thorns. It was a secret gap no larger than a fox's run, entirely hidden from the view of casual passers-by. The single neat footprint of the clockwork robin led directly through the centre of this miniature doorway, pressing into a patch of dark, damp earth that smelled of ancient peat and forgotten winter rains. One by one they lowered themselves to the ground. Rosco ducked his frame, carefully gathering his heavy tweed coat, while the bunnies tucked their long ears close to their heads. They crawled with great care, their shoulders brushing past the soft, velvety moss that lined the interior of the briar archway. The passage was long and dim, a twisting tunnel of twisted roots and interwoven branches that seemed to stretch on for miles, pulling them deeper into the very heart of the hidden valley. As they finally stepped through the other side of the dark briar tunnel, the air changed so instantly and dramatically that they all stopped in their tracks, drawing in a long, collective breath of pure astonishment. The biting, frosty chill of the late autumn afternoon vanished entirely, replaced by a deep, radiant warmth that felt like the gentle embrace of a midsummer twilight. The sky above this hidden valley was not the pale, fading grey of the outer woods. Instead, it was a magnificent, deep sapphire blue, illuminated by a soft, amber glow that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. The atmosphere was completely motionless, heavy and thick with an overwhelming, intoxicating sweetness that smelled of crushed cloves, wild honeycomb, and ripe, sun-warmed plums. They had stepped into a vast secret garden, a forgotten orchard where the traditional seasons of the valley seemed to blend together all at once. The ground beneath their feet was covered in a dense, luminous moss of a deep indigo hue, which glowed with a faint, pulsing light whenever a footstep pressed into it. Growing from this glowing carpet were trees and vines of absolute impossible beauty. To their left, a row of heavy, twisting vines crawled up ancient stone trellises, their branches bearing massive, translucent fruits that the bunnies had never seen before. These were Glass-Pears, perfect teardrop-shaped fruits with skins as clear as hand-blown crystal, revealing a swirling golden amber nectar within that glowed with a soft internal light like a tiny lantern hanging from the stem. Further into the orchard stood low, spreading bushes covered in clusters of midnight berries. These berries were the size of a plum, their skin a deep, velvety indigo that was so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. They were dusted with a fine silver bloom that glittered like starlight in the sapphire dusk. Overhead, the sweeping branches of weeping trees filled the canopy, their long, delicate leaves crafted from a pale, shimmering fabric that rustled with a sound like falling rain, even though there was no wind. Cradled gently beneath these silver leaves were large, pillowy fruits that looked like soft, ivory-coloured clouds suspended from the branches by thin, golden threads. The single lurching trail of the clockwork robin was beautifully visible on the glowing indigo moss. The little right foot had left a trail of prints that wound gracefully between the glowing roots of the impossible trees, leading them deeper into this quiet, heavenly paradise. The bunnies and Rosco went deeper into the secret orchard, their boots pressing softly into the glowing indigo moss. The deeper they went, the more the immense warmth of the garden settled into their bones. Every breath they drew was thick with the scent of wild honey and ancient tree resins, slowing their hearts to a calm, steady rhythm. Following the single dark line of footprints, they finally reached the exact center of the hidden valley. There, growing beside a crystal-clear spring that bubbled without a sound, stood the grandest tree in the entire orchard. Its trunk was a smooth, dark ebony, and its sweeping canopy of silver leaves cast a soft, shimmering light over the ground below. Sitting right between two mossy roots of this great tree was their little mechanical robin. Its springs had finally wound down to a complete, peaceful stop. It sat perfectly upright on the indigo moss, its polished brass feathers reflecting the amber glow of the garden, looking completely unharmed and content after its grand adventure. Rosco knelt down with a slow, deliberate grace, his hand gently scooping up the little clockwork bird. He slipped it into the deep, velvet-lined pocket of his heavy coat, where it rested securely. "Well, little friend," Rosco murmured in his low voice, "you have led us to a wonderful place. I think we should rest a while before we wend our way back home." The bunnies sank down onto the plush carpet of blue moss beneath the silver leaves, their tired limbs instantly sinking into the soft, supportive cushion of the earth. Millie Moonbeam, Caratina, and Berry looked up at the low-hanging branches where the incredible fruits hung within easy reach. Caratina reached out a cautious paw and gently plucked one of the large, velvety midnight berries. The skin was as soft as down, and as she broke it open, a thick, dark indigo nectar welled up, smelling of summer nights and sweet cloves. She took a slow, meditative bite. The flavor was unlike anything she had ever tasted, a heavenly sweetness that tasted like warm honey blended with the crisp freshness of starlight. Berry plucked one of the translucent Glass-Pears. As his teeth broke the crystal-clear skin, the golden nectar within melted across his tongue like warm, spiced cream, carrying a subtle hint of cinnamon and baked orchard apples. As they ate the impossible fruits in complete, restful silence, a profound and heavy change came over their bodies. It wasn't just a physical fullness, but a deep, radiating warmth that started in their chests and spread through their tumblingtons and slowly outward to the very tips of their fingers and toes. The sweetness of the fruits seemed to act like a soothing balm, dissolving every last trace of tension from their muscles. Their arms and legs felt heavy, as if they were being gently pressed down by a comforting, invisible weight. Their breathing slowed to a long, lazy cadence, and their minds became entirely uncluttered, filled only with the soft, shimmering light of the silver leaves above. They sat under the ebony tree for what felt like hours, completely insulated from the passage of time, letting the magical peace of the garden wash over them until they were utterly, beautifully relaxed. When they finally rose to leave, the sapphire sky of the hidden garden had deepened to a rich, dark indigo. They walked back toward the secret gap in the brambles, their movements slow and heavy with sleep. One by one they ducked back through the long, dim briar tunnel, brushing past the soft, velvety moss, until they emerged back on the banks of the village river. The contrast was immediate but deeply comforting. The outer valley was held fast in a crisp, sapphire blue twilight. A gentle mist was rolling off the water, and the first stars were beginning to blink into existence over the high dales. Holding the deep internal warmth of the magical fruits close to their chests, they made their way up the frosty lane, their boots making a soft crunch against the frosted gravel. When Rosco pushed open the heavy timber door of Rosehip Cottage, the familiar dry warmth of the cast-iron stove welcomed them like an old friend. The kitchen was completely still, cast in long, peaceful shadows. Keeping the profound peace of their journey, they moved through their evening routine with slow, deliberate care. Rosco took the copper kettle, filling it with cold, sweet water from the indoor pump, and set it gently on the black stove. A low, rising hum soon filled the room as the water began to heat, a predictable and soothing sound that signaled the absolute end of the day's journey. Millie Moonbeam reached into the pantry and brought out a stoneware pot of rich, creamy almond milk. She poured it into a small tin saucepan, sliding it onto the edge of the stove to warm slowly. As the milk heated, she stirred in a single generous drop of thick wildflower honey, creating a sweet, comforting fragrance that drifted through the kitchen. Meanwhile, Berry took a long silver-bladed knife and quietly sliced a fresh loaf of soft oat bread. The blade moved through the tender loaf with a clean, satisfying sound, revealing a fluffy white interior that smelled of toasted grain. They spread each thick slice with a generous layer of pale, creamy butter, letting it soak deep into the warm bread. They carried their mugs of sweet almond milk and plates of oat bread into the sitting room, sitting down in a tight circle right before the glowing crimson embers of the hearth. They ate and drank in silence. The warm milk washed over them, sending a deep, leaden wave of drowsiness through their chests and into their tumblingtons. The firelight danced across the wooden rafters, casting soft, flickering patterns that made their eyelids feel impossibly heavy. The bunnies reached for their thick, hand-dyed purple wool blankets, the beautiful gifts from Moverly Monday and Tilly Tuesday. They unfolded the heavy plush fabric, wrapping the heather-scented wool tight around their shoulders and tucking it securely beneath their chinnigans. They sank directly back into their deep, high-backed armchairs by the fire. The chairs cradled their tired bodies perfectly, absorbing their weight and holding them in complete, absolute safety. The taste of the midnight berries and Glass-Pears still lingered like the memory of a beautiful dream, making the real world feel soft and beautifully distant. With the steady, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, and the gentle, comforting breathing of their companions filling the room, they let go of the day entirely. As you let your own eyes close fully now, and you sink deeper into the absolute comfort of your own bed, let these gentle thoughts wrap around you. My day is beautifully complete, and I can rest now. My hands are still, and my mind is completely at ease. I am surrounded by warmth, safety, and quiet comfort. I give myself full permission to let go of the world. I am perfectly protected, and all is taken care of. I am ready to drift into a deep, unbroken sleep. Let the slow, lazy rhythm of your breathing carry you deeper and deeper into the quiet dark. The trail has ended. The little robin is home. The valley is fast asleep, and you are entirely safe. All was snug. All was well. Night night.